Good morning, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we are at 18830 Northwest Tolovana Street here in Portland. Located at the front of the house, I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front door of the home. We are just to the right of the front door. We have nice convenient clean out access. It's under a little tiny concrete cover plate. Looks a little more reminiscent of what like a water shutoff hides underneath. Got lucky. These usually get covered up and just concreted over, so it's nice it's here. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water is running. Maybe we'll zero out the base of the clean out. The clean out here does not actually have a thread-on style cap on it, although the threads are still there. This does a pretty good job of keeping debris out of the line. I do suggest putting an actual cap on there. From a technical standpoint, you're not supposed to have an open pipe next to like operable windows and doors because of sewer gas venting. Being that we're outside in open air, that's a pretty, honestly, not a huge concern. You need an extremely high concentration of gas to be concerning, which rarely happens. Bigger concern is kids walking along, opening that thing up, which is easy to do, and dropping rocks and stuff like that down the pipe, which I have seen many times over my career. So it's about a $5 to $10 item depending on which you choose. You can either get a thread-on style plastic cap or an expandy wing nut style. Either will do the job. Off we go here. Nice clean flow line, no grease buildup, which is nice to see. I'm a pretty big stickler on grease buildup. After almost 25,000 sewer scopes now, I've honestly come to the point where I'm more concerned about thick grease buildup when you get it throughout your line than I am a lot of structural issues like bellies and offset joints. And this is unique that we are still in cast iron out to this point. Typically this era of sewer and house, the cast iron would have only extended out about 5 feet away from the clean out, and typically what you would have had is concrete pipe. Sometimes 4-inch clay, but usually concrete. And concrete pipe, if you're going to have old pipe products, cast irons and stuff you want to have, generally speaking. Usually holds up much longer. And on that note, because this is an older sewer line, we'll get a nicer view of the flow line once the pipe's drained out at the end, but thus far, great slope and grade. That's one of the beauties of cast iron, is it generally resists settling quite effectively. We're swapping over to concrete pipe now. We're likely right around the right-of-way or street edge, but it behooves you to keep an eye on these older lines. Rescope about every 1 to 2 years to monitor the line for getting exposed to the ground. Usually the first things that start to wear out with old lines are the pipe joints. You start to see signs that the line is exposed to the ground and where it can hydro erode soil out from underneath the pipe. That generally leads to progressive settling. Once you get to that point, you lose the ability to do a trenchless epoxy liner, which this liner right now would make for a beautiful setup for that, and you could update this thing without digging a single hole. So that is why you want to keep an eye on them over time. When you get to the point of updating, it allows you to take advantage of that repair process, but you make sure you don't miss the opportunity to. If you let a line wear out too far, you often will lose that ability if you start developing bellies and offset joints. Alrighty, so where I'm picking the locate up right now, if you are facing the house from the street again, the line is doing a shot. I'm going to pull back and double check my locates here in just a second, but we're sitting over kind of in front of the water meters. My locate's coming up right in the street right now, just off the curb. Anyway, I was out here in Northwest Portland yesterday with almost a very similar setup as this. What I think we're going to do now is we're turning and we're now going to shoot across the street. I believe, from the looks of it anyway, I think you've got a main lateral, possibly some kind of party line configuration. You get these over here in Northwest. Like the one I was at yesterday, very similar setup as this one, except there was a party line connection just prior to the street curb, and the line didn't actually terminate out in the roadway. This one, where I was just out there on the Y connection, I was picking that Y up out in the street about 3 feet off the curb. But very similar setup as the one I was at yesterday. So that Y connection we hit there theoretically could actually be a branch of pipe coming off someone else's house. It's hard to say. You'd have to contact the city and find out how they have this laid out. I'm just going to do a quick locate here to see if we're shooting across the street now like I thought. All right, so where we're heading right now, we're basically middle of the road, and I'm not going to try and shove further than this right now. It's a hard Y to push through. This was mostly just to get verification of what I was thinking was going on. You'll see an arrow in the street, white arrow, middle of the road, straight out from the water meters at the front left corner of the property. You'll see the water meters there. So if you can imagine, it would appear there's a line running up and down the left side property line out into the road. And so where we intersect that line, it's not like we went straight to the middle of the street and hit a main lateral like you would normally see. Once you hit that Y connection, the line then turns and then shoots outward into the road, and it looks like it's going to cross the entire width of the street. At the intersection on the other side of the road where the pedestrian crosswalk is, you'll see a manhole there. The arrow right now is pointing straight at that manhole, and that's what I would expect to see, especially with some kind of sewer easement generally. And that's what I want to see is if you draw a line, imaginary line from that where that line is running, and you see a manhole where it would likely intersect a main lateral, that's a good sign typically. That usually means what you're tying onto here is some kind of city main lateral asset. Not always the case, but that's usually the case. So I'm gonna just put a couple markings down here. I'm also gonna put a marking here just for reference. I do recommend looking into it to make sure there's nothing about this that is non-conforming, that the city doesn't like, something of that nature. In this county, outside of Multnomah County, Washington County has usually been pretty nice about party line type setups. Most of them I haven't seen get separated, but things do change over time, so I always recommend looking into that. Okay, you'll see a white Y marking here. I'm going to pull back just a couple feet. My locate here for some reason is coming in a little bit jumpy. So I'm going to pull back, and right about here I think is where we cross the curb. And the line crosses the curb at a bit of an angle, it looks like. Alrighty, so and this is right about where the curb is at here. Locates are still coming in a little bouncy, but my signal is moving the way I want to see it. I'm getting a little interference from something over there. So I would check into that, especially being in this county. Typically speaking, the homeowner is responsible all the way to the main connection. So unlike Multnomah County, for instance, where typically the city takes over at the face of the curb, it's even more important out here to check into that kind of stuff, because that Y connection there, even though you might be in a shared scenario or could be a city main for all I know, that's what's worth looking into. It's a more unusual setup to see. Anyway, concrete pipe there, fair condition for its age, intact. It drains off well. But again, I would keep an eye on this sewer line. You have the teeniest little bit of standing water right here. This stuff right here, even if you did a liner, should be lineable. In fact, it would displace all that water. And this thing is only a belly from a hyper-technical standpoint. This is not the kind of thing I'm typically calling out or even mentioning hardly. That's not even going on a report. It's so minor. But you do want to keep an eye on this. The line shoots under an immense amount of concrete. It goes under concrete walkway at the front of the house, the patio area, also the walkway, the entire width of the driveway, curb, sidewalk, you name it. So this is why liners were invented, and why it really behooves you to keep an eye on things. But first and foremost, contact the city. I put enough markings down there. You can see where the line crosses the curb. You'll see it does a pretty hard angled shot across the curb. And then shortly thereafter, it hits a Y connection just a couple feet off the street curb out in the road, turns, and then shoots across the street. And then by the time it connects on to what looks like for sure the city main, looks like it's heading straight towards the manhole on the opposite side of the street. You have another landmark too to go off of on your side of the road over here, in line with where that Y connection is. You'll see that in the sidewalk there's a big, it's about an 8-10 inch diameter steel cover plate. That looks like an access panel clean out, possibly some type of mini manhole type thing, probably for servicing that line. So check into that, make sure the city doesn't have any issues with it. From what I've heard, I don't know this is for sure the case, but I know that there are some sewer projects going on out here. The other thing to be aware of is sometimes when these, as time goes on, the cities sometimes will go through, update the main laterals, and separate the lines and run individual laterals. I don't know if that's the case here or not, but I guess just contact them and ask if they have any projects going in like that. that might, you know, sometimes the city will cover the cost of stuff like that down the road. Sometimes they don't. So another thing to look into, just so you're aware of what may be coming in the future. So anyway, if you walk straight that way, it does like a 45-degree angle shot right towards the water meter area, about where that street sign is at, where I'm pointing at. If you walk over there, you'll see my paint markings. Anyway, as far as flow goes, we have good flow all the way out to the Y connection, which I believe is a city asset, but I'm not positive. And with that Y connection there, I just can't push the camera through safely without risking damaging it to get to the other side of the road. But we have indeed made it to a part of the line where you are certainly at least tied in with other people at that point. May very well be city. Good flow all the way out to the middle of the street there. All the piping is scoped, is in fair condition for its age, has good flow, is very clean and functioning properly at this time. But rescope, I would do it about every 1 to 2 years. I wouldn't wait longer than that with a line this age, just to monitor the line for any settling issues or anything like that, so you can take advantage of a trenchless update down the road. And if you find out the city's doing some kind of project in the next 5 years, I would still keep an eye on it. But you know, if they did something like separate lines or things of that nature, you may want to hold off before doing that in the event that the line has to get rerouted or something of that nature. But very, very nice looking and nicely functioning old sewer line there.